I'm interested.
Now I'm interested. Now I'm interested.
Yeah, when is he coming on? He's talking some shit on Twitter.
I know. It's like, you think that's going to work? Like, that's so stupid. Like, this is such a bad look. It's such a bad choice.
There's a little desperation in it.
But it's just stupid. It's like, this is a bad strategy. Like, I probably would have had him on.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, nah, what are you doing?
There is a fun version where you just do it and cook him. You know?
He'll cook himself.
I mean, that seems to be
all you have to
happening.
do is just ask him questions.
Yeah, it's like, why are people leaving?
Well, why do you say this thing all the time where you rattle off all the good things about California? When anybody says something bad about California, it's like, #1 in Fortune 500 companies, #1 in higher education, #1. It was all that shit before you were there. It was all that shit forever. It's because the weather's perfect, man. It has nothing to do with
California's an unbelievable state.
Amazing.
This is just what we have to call. It's like the
mountains and the oceans 2 hours apart.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's nuts.
It's also so delusional that he thinks he's still the king of the jungle. He still thinks he is the Don. I think one thing this really is indicative of is how much that Donald Trump interview went to his head. I think he genuinely believes he handed the presidency to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance you're right about that. I think he does really feel like he's more influential than he probably is now. And I'm not denying his influence. I know he was very influential. Him and his band of fucking idiot morons. They definitely played a very big role in helping Trump get elected. But I don't actually think that Gavin Newsom needs Joe Rogan or whatever. And I'm not a Gavin Newsom fan. Joe Rogan is 100% correct to mock him for his ridiculous answer on AIPAC. You're not going to find me defending Gavin Newsom at basically any point, but I think Gavin Newsom has bigger fish to fry right now than Joe Rogan. Obviously, Gavin Newsom has a lot to work on as far as his messaging is concerned, specifically as it relates to Israel. I don't think he needs Joe Rogan. I really genuinely think at this point, he does not need Joe Rogan. I think there's enough backlash against Joe Rogan, as we've demonstrated to you guys, not just from libs, but from fellow comics in the similar scene, that it's now actually possible and even popular for Gavin Newsom to take shots at Joe Rogan because of the fact that he's such an obvious right-wing chud and a propagandist for the Trump administration. So Gavin Newsom, this is the tweet that started it all. Joe Rogan is a snack-sized podcaster who can't stop talking about me. Obsessed, crush, no thank you, but is too scared to just have me on and let his audience hear the truth. Just like Dozy Don, he often chickens out. I've never had any problems with the guy and wish the mini host the best in life. I'll come on and we'll help save the show and its plummeting ratings. GCN. So, the real brilliant thing about this is that it made Joe Rogan fall for the trap of pearl clutching about this tweet in the exact same way that him and his buddies love to mock liberals for pearl clutching about Donald Trump tweets. And obviously, in case the joke went over Joe Rogan's fucking head, this tweet is supposed to be a parody of a Donald Trump tweet. It's actually specifically written to emulate the style in which Donald Trump types and in which he talks. So for you to get all butthurt and offended and for you to act like this is, unbecoming and unpresidential or whatever of Gavin Newsom, you're basically admitting that the guy who you endorsed and who you supported is a total fucking clown who acts in a way that is beneath the presidency of this country. So I think it was brilliant bait from Gavin Newsom. I genuinely can't believe that Joe Rogan fell for it in such a bitch-made way. Again, without even making good material of the situation, but basically just being like, I can't believe he insulted me online. I would have had him on, but now I'm not gonna because I'm offended and because my feelings are hurt. That's literally what you guys saw. He can't take a fucking joke. This is obvious comedy. For one, it's not even written by Gavin Newsom. It's written by one of his fucking staffers or whatever. But this is obviously fucking comedy. Of course, Gavin Newsom would go on Joe Rogan's show and be more than capable of having a civil conversation with Joe. Again, I'm not a huge Gavin Newsom fan, but I'll give him credit there. He would be able to survive a Joe Rogan experience in a way that Kamala Harris couldn't, right? I do think he's at least that talented as a politician, where he could survive an off-the-cuff podcast interview. Not that he'd do amazing. He's no Barack Obama, you know what I'm saying? But I do think he is at that level. So again, for Joe Rogan to fall for this bait, crazy.
Oh, it's hilarious. And he also makes the comments that Joe Rogan hates getting in a shot about his height, right? Which is something that Donald Trump also loves to do, take shots at people about stuff like that. This moment right here in the Andrew Schultz conversation, I think it perfectly captures everything that has gone wrong with Joe Rogan. If we go ahead and play this really quickly, I'll go ahead and chuck it up on there. But if you were to just play this, and then I'll give you one more piece of information that Kyle also used to dunk on Joe Rogan, it's just absolutely crazy.
They'll put the cancer in the kids' cereal.
Yeah, they don't give a fuck.
Like, if you don't regulate the food, they'll put anything in it.
Well, that's...
So you need to have somebody looking after
it's in it
shit.
right now. This is this RFK Jr. shit where they're turning him into a quack, and these companies are going to go under if they have to follow these regulations. They're following them already in Canada.
Exactly. It's like...
Same factory. Same Fruit Loops.
And now we got to feel bad for Kellogg's. Right? We're like, oh my God, they're not going to make it. Poor Kellogg's.
Didn't... Newsom just veto a bill that would stop forever chemicals. There was a bill that would stop forever chemicals being used on, I think, cooking utensils. Like, there's certain, like, non-stick cookware that has forever chemicals on it. If you're scraping it with, like, a metal spatula, it'll probably get in your diet. Yeah. Not good.
Yeah.
I think they were banning it. So
Why would he do that?
He vetoed it. Yeah.
Why
he
would he do
vetoed a California bill banning cookware with PFAS's forever chemicals. It says the bill would cause sudden product shift, sparking debate among chefs, lawmakers, and environmentalists. No, the bill stops poison, bro. The bill stops poison for going into human bodies.
Yeah.
And so he's happy to grandstand about this, right? Wow, it's really important to Joe Rogan. Oh my gosh, thanks. We've got to make America healthy again. Trump deregulated this same exact shit for the entire fucking country. Not a peep from Joe Rogan. And he still went out and sat at the guy's inauguration, clapped for him. Patted him on the ass for the entire podcast appearance. It wasn't something that was troubling for Joe Rogan then.
Yeah, 100%. Completely crazy. Again, just a total double standard, a complete refusal to call out Trump. In the same way that, he calls out Gavin Newsom for, such a mean, rude, offensive tweet, totally ignoring the fact that Donald Trump himself posted this about Joe. It'll be interesting to see how loudly Joe Rogan gets booed the next time he enters the UFC ring. Instead of taking Trump on in that instance, Joe totally bent the knee like a bitch. He did exactly what Dana White told him to, which was to totally, forgive and forget, to be a total, coward, to not bring this up when Trump was on his podcast, but instead to give Trump a totally softball blowjob interview that went on for multiple hours and in which Trump was never seriously challenged.
What was the context of this again?
It was after Joe Rogan had said something mildly critical of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Trump immediately, pounced on it. He was like, fuck Joe Rogan. A bunch of people said it was a terrible idea. And then, both of them quickly made up again.
Interesting. Yeah, I just was curious for what was the straw that broke the camel's back? Because that wasn't eerily close to when he went on. I mean, just a few weeks later, they did the podcast together.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's a total bitch move from Joe Rogan. It's the most unmanly shit ever.
Yeah.
But now it's this huge deal that Gavin Newsom wants to, jokingly go after you on his a parody Twitter account. You're actually going to act offended. You're actually going to act like, wow, you violated this gentlemanly agreement. We must engage in discourse before talking shit online. Or what the fuck is this, bro? Come on. And again, yeah, it's crazy that he's acting like this. It is, however, as you said, given Gavin Newsom, a new tactic, which is to basically call Joe Rogan a chicken. And he can keep doing that until Rogan finally relents, much like Rogan eventually did with Trump. He had him on. Do you think that Joe Rogan will relent? Do you think he'll have Gavin Newsom on? And if he does, do you agree with me that Gavin Newsom could at least do better than someone like Kamala Harris would on that platform?
Oh, I agree. I think that Joe Rogan would do the thing that it's hard for Joe Rogan to be antagonistic with people for his entire show. It kind of goes against the entire theme. It kind of goes against his entire strategy. He uses the mirror method a lot, which is just kind of feed positive energy back to whoever he's talking to, so they'll share more information with him. So I think because of that, there's not a real hard chance that this turns into an hour and a half long fucking, I'm coming after you, bro. They probably have a gentleman's handshake, squash the beef a little bit. All right, man, let's go talk for 90 minutes kind of a deal. I imagine if it did happen. So I think that gives the leg up to Gavin Newsom. He can go into there and be like, I'm not afraid of this guy. Look, we had a good talk. He might have said some things about me, but we left understanding each other better. And I hope to, represent all of people, including people like Joe Rogan when I'm president, which is what we know this all gets down to. He's trying to drum up publicity for himself and hype for himself to, continue to be the de facto front runner for the Democratic primary in 2028. And in that sense, I think it's very smart of him to call Joe Rogan a chicken. And even if he does get invited on, like, then it's even smarter because he's like, I can go out there and I can prove, even if I'm not winning over Joe Rogan's audience, I'm showing the rest of the country, like, I will go into the lion's den.
Yep, 100%. And I actually think that Joe Rogan is straight up scared of Gavin Newsom. I really do. Because, again, I'm not trying to give too much credit to Newsom, but I do think that Newsom is a better politician, again, than Kamala Harris, than like freaking Joe Biden, at least at the stage Joe Biden was at. So, people are always like, oh, the Democrats are terrified to, go on Joe Rogan's show. At this point, I actually think that Joe Rogan would be terrified to have Gavin Newsom on. Why? Because Joe Rogan has spent the last 4 fucking years talking endless shit on California and on the job that Gavin Newsom has done. Joe Rogan knows that Gavin Newsom is a politician. He's a slick, sleazy bastard. He's, pretty good at communicating in the same way that most politicians are. I think Joe Rogan is afraid that he would invite Newsom on. Newsom would start defending his record and defending his state against all of the bullshit that Joe Rogan has spread about California and all the reasons why he had to leave California. And it would leave Joe Rogan kind of flustered and emotional, unable to properly articulate and debate his qualms and his, frustrations with the leadership in the state. Because obviously Joe Rogan's not a good debater.
Right. I was going to say the same thing.
He's not a debater at all. And he knows that, right? Unless it's like, bullying someone and yelling about, trans people in sports. Like, Joe Rogan is not equipped to debate.
You can debate a straw man. That's it.
Exactly. And again, Gavin Newsom, for all his faults, is a pretty fucking good politician. He's a pretty good communicator. We've seen some lapses in those skills as we reacted to the other day when he was asked about AIPAC. That was a real rough moment for him. But overall, he's a pretty good politician. There's a reason why he's the governor of California. There's a reason why he survived that recall. He is like, he's a classic politician, right? So I do think he could come on there and kind of take Joe Rogan to task on this stuff and, talk his way around Rogan's stupid right-wing talking points. And I think Joe's genuinely afraid of that. He's afraid of being backed into corner and made to look foolish by this guy who he spent so long villainizing. And again, I say this as a Gavin Newsom hater. I say this as someone who desperately, dearly hopes that Gavin Newsom does not get anywhere close to the Democratic nomination in 2028, despite his intentions. Trust me. But I'm just analyzing the situation as far as who's the better communicator, who's better on their feet, who's the better debater. And I don't think it's Joe Rogan.
No, 100%. We've seen Joe Rogan debate a handful of times throughout his decades-long run of hosting the Rogan Experience, and it's primarily over 2 issues, like you mentioned. He debated the fuck out of Steven Crowder when it came to pot back in the day when he was like really gung-ho about that. It was actually one of the better debate performances I've ever seen Joe Rogan do. It's become like a historic episode because he really loses his temper on Crowder. And then obviously he debated the Adam Ruins Everything guy about trans issues. And, that guy, I think he left some, room on the table to do better. But I think you're right that when it comes to a one-on-one combat conversation about California, this is prime for Gavin Newsom to succeed because he has all of the information at his fingertips. This is a guy that is constantly fed things and talking points about California. He knows when somebody criticizes California to this, that I can bring up this and it will neutralize that criticism. And he's going to have all of it, and he's going to prep, and he's going to do a really good job. And Joe Rogan's going to go out there like he always does with no prep and vibes only. And that only works if you're going to flatter your guests. It doesn't work if you're going to challenge them.
100%. So yeah, pretty humiliating stuff. I ultimately, I do think that, from Joe Rogan's perspective, it actually would be a good idea to have Gavin Newsom on. I think it probably would, because obviously we've talked a lot about the narrative surrounding the Joe Rogan sphere and the Austin scene. If nothing else, I think having Gavin Newsom on would be a big enough story. It would be, big enough deal for, the conversation to kind of move on a little bit from that stuff and just, at least there's a new headline, right? At least it's like a new thing for people to look at. Ooh, a new big guest, even though it's Gavin Newsom. Obviously, it would depend on how Joe Rogan handled the conversation, but I do think you need something big to kind of move people's attention away from all of these mounting criticisms and qualms about the Austin scene. And having Gavin Newsom on, again, it would be a big deal. It would get a ton of views, like, way more than his recent handful of podcasts. And if he handled it well, if he actually handled it in an interesting and measured way, then I do think it could kind of restore some of his clout or some of his reputation as being like the average Joe. Like he'll talk to anyone, right? Because obviously he had Trump on. If he next has Newsom on, and again, doesn't get triggered, doesn't get defensive, but actually handles it well, I actually think that could go some ways as far as restoring his reputation, with normies.
You're totally right. And I think a lot of people have short memories and they would be willing to forgive Joe Rogan because they're not going to be as angry about the things that he's done as we are, as people in our audience. I know you guys, you're never forgiving Joe Rogan. I'm never forgiving Rogan. I'm never just going back to being a routine listener like I was when I was a 19-year-old kid that thought he was really sharp. But I think that when you talk about how he used to be this guy that people would say, oh, wow, I want Joe Rogan to, be the debate moderator for the presidential debates. I want Joe Rogan to, be he's like the new late night TV host or whatever. I mean, that reputation of Joe Rogan is very much still in play for normies, right? Flyover people. And I think that he fucked himself really, really badly. He made a terrible mistake when he stopped being a fence sitter and he decided to go become like a hardcore right winger, because the reality is that America is fine with a fence sitter. A guy who just makes up his mind and bends right a few times out of a dozen is okay with them. But a guy who is platforming Donald Trump, kissing his ass, never criticizing him, that's a real big problem.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there. Be there.